Okay, this is, like Joe said, this is going to be the second half of the SSIS Basics class. I decided to go with a lot of the things that people do on an on a daily basis, right? Most of the packages you write throughout your entire life are going to be fairly simple. Most people don't need, tons of bells and whistles in doing the thing. Most of the data that you move is going to be just straight data move, maybe a little bit of transformation, but you're going to have some pretty specific you're going to have some pretty specific requirements as far as volume goes, and as far as a little bit of the acrobatics that you have to do to load those files, right? But within the data, I mean, even Eric and Saranya have the most experience here. They'll attest that most of the loads that you're gonna do are going to be fairly straightforward. So I decided to build the class around that. Now, to that end, I've already had questions about my wallpaper, and this is I don't know where this is. Clearly in Thailand or China or Japan or Vietnam or Cambodia or somewhere.
It might be from some Mayan culture, Mayan civilization.
Yeah, maybe. I'm going by the writing over there. But it is clearly an egg stacking competition. And if you remember from a couple weeks ago when we had the SSIS Basics class, I had the guy over there standing the egg on end. He was one of those guys there doing that competition. It's just absolutely incredible, isn't it? I mean, it is just amazing.
All those are eggs?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just amazing. So, anyway, I decided to change that up a little bit this week. Okay, so I'm trying to decide if I want to just jump into it. And let's just jump into it, right? This week we are going to be doing a bank application. I'm pushing flat files to and from banks that are my customers, and they're sending us whatever customer data they have, and I wrote a little database and populated it with 10 million some odd records, which I came to find out that on this little laptop here it doesn't even come close to being able to perform. So I've limited the queries to 10 records per bank. They're in the neighborhood of 150 banks. So we've got plenty of data to work with. Now, and when I put this up on the internet, you're going to have access to the full data set, the database, and the packages, and you'll see that the packages themselves are pretty well documented. There's a lot of stuff inside of here. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this package first. I'm going to explain to you what we're doing. We're going to build this package first from scratch, and then we're going to see the different variations that I've coded, and then talk about a couple variations that I didn't code, and then one that I coded that ate itself right before I came up here, and I can't get it back, and I'm really, really upset about that because it was really cool. Really upset about that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add a new package, and we'll call it package 1. Why not? Okay, so we've got our new package. Now, what we're going to do is a very common task that people get asked for is to export a table into separate text files based off of some criteria. In this case, it's going to be bank ID. It could have been bank name, but I chose the ID since it's a unique name, right? And you'll see that quite often. I've had this requirement in the last few years over a couple dozen times to create separate files based off of the data, based off of what the data says, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take data out of our bank table, and we're going to, for every single bank that we have, we're going to export all of that bank's accounts into a text file, okay? Into separate text files, so everybody has their own list of accounts, and you're going to send that off to the bank, okay? We're not actually sending it in this package, okay? Because the sending part depends on you and the agreement that you and the bank have. It could be FTP, it could be HTTP, it could be a web service. I mean, it could be all kinds of things, right? So we're gonna concentrate on our part of it, and then we're gonna assume that the bank is gonna attach to us and take the file somehow. Fair enough? So what we've got to do first is we've got to get a list of banks. And this is going to start you off on a brand new task that a lot of people actually really don't know that much about. We're gonna use the ADO record set, and this is actually one of my favorite ones because it's kind of it gives you kind of an in-package cursor that you can use. Now I wouldn't use this too terribly much as far as large data sets. If you were going to pipe 200,000 rows into this record set, I wouldn't really do that. You're going to eat up a lot of memory needlessly. Okay, but as far for our purposes goes, it's a really, really nice technique. It's the one I'm using for my data mart loads downstairs. And okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to add ourselves a data flow task. The second thing we need to do, stop it, is create a variable that we will call record set. And for our record set, this variable has to be an object data type. That says object, right? Oh, I can look at my screen. I don't have to look up there. Okay. Still can't get used to that. Okay, so it has to be an object, and it's really best if it's at a package level scope, because a lot of different guys are going to need to be able to see this, right? So from in here, we are going to take an OLADB data source, and then we're going to use a destination. We're going to use the record set destination, and that is an in-memory ADO record set. That's how that works.
Why can't we use a flatfile destination, because that's what we are getting in the flatfile, isn't it?
Right. Well, the reason we can't use a flat file is because we're going to need to iterate through these records. You'll see in a minute.
Because of the conditions?
Right. You'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. Okay. This is going to be a cursor. Okay. So you'll see in a minute why we can't use a flat file. Because even if I used a flat file, I'd have to use a flat file as a source. I have to have a way to read that flat file and get the next record. And that's, if you did that with a flat file destination here, that'd be very difficult. I mean, you could do it in script and you'd have to keep up with it and all. Yeah, it'd be very hard. This is a much easier method. So we've got our record set. Let's go ahead and set our. Oh, great! I don't have it set up here. Fine. Maybe I should use a shared data source. So I'll come here. Use that. Table or view is fine. Hard to believe it's local, isn't it? And we want to use the bank table. And if we preview here, we've got our banks and our IDs, right? And all of that other information. But all we're really going to use is ID and bank, because that's all we really scripted for. So we're going to get that, and we're going to put that into our destination here. And the destination we're going to assign to that variable we just created, that record set variable, that is an object data type. So it's already a cursor. I mean, it's already an array. Okay? So we're going to assign that to there. Oh, sorry. I'm going to click on your input columns and check them both. There we go. There. Now we've got our record set ready to go. And then I'm going to use a sequence. Stop. I'll go ahead and expand this while I'm doing all this stuff. And then I'm going to use a for each. There. And we'll just talk about that now. Now, sequences. I touched on sequences last time and said that they're a way to order operations so that you perform one whole chunk of operations before moving on to the other chunk of operations. That's true, but they're also really, really good for troubleshooting. If you're going to have this sequence and you're going to have a bunch of other sequences in your, or a bunch of other operations in your package, it's a good idea to wrap autonomous sequences in a sequence container so you can troubleshoot just this one, just that one, just that one. And you'll see what I mean later when we get into some of the other packages. I'll try to call it out as I've put two contrasting steps in different packages. You'll see that if they weren't in sequence containers, I wouldn't be able to test them individually. So it's a really good idea to put stuff in sequence containers. Now, the for each loop container is just what it sounds like. It's gonna run every single operation inside of here for every single operation that you have. Fair enough? So when I double click on this guy, I have my collection. And you can do different types of collections. You see for each file. We're going to do that one later. Okay? You can see for each item, for each ADO, for each from variable, so on and so on. We're going to do for each ADO, because remember I told you that the record set destination is an in-memory ADO record set. Okay? And then I'm going to choose the variable that comes from record set. Rows in the first table. Sure, we've only got one table in there, but you could have multiple tables, right? So, with that, I need to create a couple more variables that I forgot about. Let's create this one, and let's call it current bank ID, and that should be integer. Yep. And then let's create current bank name. And give it a string, because a bank name is a string, right? We're going to go ahead and save our package. We like to save it every now and then, especially after the last couple days I've had. We'll go ahead and put a precedence here. A little bit of room, because you want that to fire first, right? Okay. Just to recap, still got my collection, still piping it into here. So my variable, I'm going to use the bank ID as index 0, and the bank name is index 1. Now, index 0 and 1 are the column order in which they're being pulled in, right? So if you remember back from here, hello, we're pulling in columns 1 and column 2, but it's a 0-based index over there, so it's columns 0 and 1. Everybody got that? So for each iteration, what I'm saying here is for each iteration of this record set, I'm going to map the current record to the bank ID and the bank name variables. Does everybody get that? That's for every single time. So every single go around, these two variables are going to change to the current value of this guy. Okay? Boom, 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 boom. There was something else I had on that and I just forgot it. Maybe it'll come to me. No, as it turns out it's not. Oh yeah, I know what it was. This is just a naming convention of mine, the cur in front of that. It tells me that by looking at it, that if I had, you know, a couple dozen variables here, that these are used as current iteration variables. So cur means current, so that will always be inside of a loop somewhere. So that's always my cursor variable. Okay, so inside of here, and this is actually, now we're learning so many skills here, right? We've already learned how to use an ADO record set. We're learning how to use a sequence container. We're learning how to use a for each loop and how to set it up. Now we're gonna learn what actually has to happen inside of that loop, right? So inside that loop, we need a data flow task. We've got our data flow task again, and inside our data flow task, yeah, we're trying to create files, right? Okay, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to use a flat file destination. I'm going to attach them. Now, if I'm going too fast, or if there's something you don't understand, by all means let me know. But in the packages you're going to get with the download, all of this stuff is explained in minute detail. And that partially for you and partially for me, right? So here, we're going to use the only one we have. We're going to select from bank account, because we want the bank account information for every single account, right, for every single bank. I'm going to take all of it.
One more thing, John, once you do the mappings, can't we change the mappings again? Like, say now you map what columns you want, isn't it? Once it's done, like
Once it's done, it's done. Once it's done, it's done. Right, and actually, what I want to do here is I want to do a SQL command, because I want to say select star from where ID equals question mark. And that question mark comes from this parameter here. That is the current bank ID. Right? Map my columns. Looks good. So what I'm saying here, I was saying this parameter here, this question mark is a parameter placeholder. If I had 2 and 3 and 4 of them, they would be lined up in here as in 2 and 3 and 4. So they go in order, right? And they have to go in order. In OLEDB, okay, we're using an OLEDB provider right here. If we were using a .NET provider, an ADO provider, then the it would look more like that. Okay? But OLEDB wants to see a question mark. I wish they would unify that, but it is what it is. Okay? So what I'm saying so far, and I'll just catch you up. So what I'm saying so far is, for every one of these that's returned, this is going to query the table with that current value. So it's going to query it where it says, stop that. And it's actually going to say, stop that. Where it says the current bank ID, where the bank ID equals the current bank ID. And let me make sure that that's what that's actually the name of the column. It is, bank ID. Excellent. Okay, so we're golden there. Now I need to set up this guy. I'll double click on it. One day, there we go. I know I need a new one of these. Delimited is great. Verificating. Ah, there we go. Okay. Flatfile Manager, the file name, we'll just say basics 2 /. Right? And definitely columns in the first row. I like pipe delimited. And there we go. Now you need to go to the mappings. Now there we go. Okay. So what's going to happen as it stands is, for every single bank ID, it's going to query the database and it's going to put it in this file and default.txt, right? And it's going to override it every time. So only the last bank is going to get its file, okay? Because we haven't made the file dynamic yet. Now we need to make the file dynamic. And this is a little bit trickier, but not really that much. So I need to go down here to the Flatfile Manager, go to the properties, and you'll see the expressions right here. And in expressions, I can pick the connection string. Okay? And in that connection string, and this is why we had to have a package level scope for both of those cursor variables that we put in there, because this guy needs to be able to see it. If you made a for each level variable, I can't see it from here, but if you made a for each level variable, the connection manager wouldn't be able to see it and it would come up blank. Okay? And you would have the same file again, except it would be .text. So what we're going to do here, double backslash, because it's an escape character. Okay? Basics 2, whack. Here, plus, we're going to pick our variable, and we want it to be the bank name, because we're just going to call it whatever the bank calls it, right? We're going to call it the name of the bank, plus .text. And if I resolve that, I'll get I kept doing that when I was making the class too. There we go. So you see how both of these singles escape. Both of these doubles escape into a single, right? Now I haven't filled that cursor yet, So I don't have a file name here. But I've got the right format, and that's what I want it to look like, right? So I got that. I got that. So for every single one of these, it's going to go in here. It's going to assign both of those variables the ID. It's going to query off of the ID in here. It's going to query off of the ID. Where are you? Because that's what we've set it up to do, right? And then it's going to build the file name off of the name. You don't want to build it off of the ID because nobody knows what bank ID, 417 is, right? That's not going to tell you anything. Now you can also get into trouble with this that we'll talk about later. Never mind. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So if everything goes well, this should populate. Go. Populate. Be good to me. Oh crap. Hold it. This way. Okay. So let me come here. Say select top 10 star. That'll be better. But you see I do have a file there. So it's working. I'll save this again. And here we go with the pretty blinkies. Blink, 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 blink. See, for every one you'll see it blink. And we can come in here, if we're fast enough, and we can see it whipping through 10 row, 10 row, 10 row, 10 row, 10 row.
So a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Since it's integrated into Visual Studio now, do you have the ability to set up breakpoints?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's how I debug most of my packages, and that's how I debugged a couple of these packages too to figure out what was going wrong. Yeah. Okay, so you can see here that we've populated our table, our folder here with a file for every single bank. Every single bank has 10 records. That's actually not too bad. That's a very common request. And this suits the need very, very well.
How'd you get the dot text one?
Yeah.
You have a no-name dot text.
Oh, yeah, so I do. Who knows? Yeah, I don't know. What do you mean? There's no dot text there.
It doesn't have a bad thing.
Yeah.
Knowledge that.
Yeah, there may be one. There may be a value in there. No, there shouldn't be, but maybe there is. Okay. So we've populated this with, and that's the last package I'm going to write from scratch today. Just wanted to show you that it's not really that difficult. You can do it on the fly. And of course, I had my other package as a backup just in case I really messed it up. But now we will look at the other package here because not only does it give you all the details on how to do all of this, everything that we've done, but it also really it drives home a point that I try to drive home in all of my packages, and that's naming your steps appropriately. Be nice to yourself, guys. And I'll talk about this more as we go on. But you'll see that this is the bank cursor. That's what it does. This is the bank file sequence. This is for each bank. This is where the actual files get created, right? And I even go further than that in some of the other ones. But don't just leave it like I left it here, because that doesn't tell you anything at all about your package. Doesn't tell anybody else anything at all about your package. And if I'm the one that has to support your package and I pull this up at 3 a.m., the developer's getting a call, right? Go troubleshoot your package. I can't see a thing, right? So do your packages appropriately. Now, I've got a couple variations on this guy right here. This is the multi-bank file, I think. Yeah. So, and I've got a couple variations on here just to kind of show you what kinds of things are possible. And I've got one with folders. So this is about the same thing, except it puts each file in its own folder. And what we've done here is we've added a file system task. And we've set it to the create directory. You've got all of these choices, right? I'm not going to sit there and read them to you because you can read. But one thing that's really important is to make sure you say use if exists. Because if you don't say use if exists and you run it the first time, it'll create them all. The second time, it'll fail because they already exist. Okay? So, and this is important because if you've got a situation where you've got different customers, whether they be internal groups or actual physical external customers that have that you need to have rights only to their folder, only to their data, and they can't see anybody else's data, you can't really set those rights easily on the files when you create them. When I dumped these files out here, there's no easy way to go through there and say only give this guy rights or that guy rights or that guy rights and lock everybody else out, right? But you can do that on a folder. It's a lot easier when you run this the first time to then go through and set up all of your security, and then it's already there, and then they can only access their folders. Okay, so it's yet another way to segregate it. But you can see we haven't changed anything. The only thing we've done inside of this for each loop that we had before was added a file system task. So for every single one of those, let me see if. And for the file system task, I think source connection bank folder. So I've created a source connection here that is a folder connection. And inside that folder connection, that's what I did. It's coming back to me. I've got an expression that says the connection string is SSIS basics 2 and then the current bank name. So it's going to look for that path, and if that path doesn't exist, it's going to create it. So again, we're taking the exact same thing we did before, and we're just applying it to folders before we do that. Okay? So we'll run this one, I hope. Even though I ran every one of these like 11 times this morning, I'm still always relieved when they actually run and everything goes green. Because I've had a lot of problems on my box today, and I've actually like reinstalled Visual Studio just because it was. Remember last time I couldn't copy anything, any tasks? Well, I still can't. But at least now the script task works this time. So partially. So I'm going to have to do a complete reinstall. So there, we got that. They should be first, and then here's all my folders with all of my files in them. Anybody want to see the full 10 million row load? No, not really. There's just a lot of yellow, you know. So that's actually not too bad either. We got some pretty cool stuff in there. And now watch if I run that again. Since I used if exists, then it'll still run, and I'll show you what happens when I take it off, because nothing drives home a point like seeing a big red flag in your face. And you see when I come here that it just overwrites that file. There we go. Now if I take this guy off, that means it's going to try to create something that's already created. And that's if it... Yeah, see? Cannot create directory. User chose... Yeah, there, see? So it already knows that the directory exists. And you just can't do it. You just flat out can't. So I'm going to set this back because it's going to go on the internet. Okay, so far so good?
So it overrides the file?
Yes.
Can you say that to append to the file?
No. No, that's actually a little bit more difficult. Maybe we'll make that the next text file class, because Saranya already requested something really, really difficult. That's done all in script, and I don't know if we're actually going to get to it. Maybe Well, I don't think there's any need to do it at all, because she said she already knew how to do it. She just wanted to show off or something. But maybe I will. But it's pretty advanced stuff. Okay, so I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record a little bit, but I'm going to break the record a little bit, because some of you are actually starting to write packages, and some of you are actually starting to write packages with text files. So I'm going to go over these steps again just to make sure everybody absolutely understands, because it takes a while to start thinking SIS, right? And we'll go ahead and use this one. You start off with a bank cursor. You start off with a data flow. You query your database, and you set it to the record set destination. Record set destination saves to a variable that is an object type, right? You don't have to put it in a sequence container, but it's a good idea, because if you wanted to do something after this, and you'll see, like I said, you'll see later on in some of these other packages where that's going to be really useful. But inside your for each loop, you're going to say for each something, right? In your collection enumerator, you've got to say for each something. And we're saying for each ADO enumerator, right? You could say for each SMO, for each from variable, okay? But and that may work here too. We may be able to do that here too. For each file, which we're going to get to later, but for each something, and then here, since we've chosen ADO, we have to tell it the name of the one that we populated in the ADO record set, right? For each one of those, you're going to map it to the current variable. Okay, that is a variable that holds the current iteration of the values that are being piped in from the cursor in index order, in select order, right? Does everybody understand that? Everybody get that? Okay. Because I didn't understand it that fast. So once you've got that, you can do anything inside of here that you want to. What we're choosing to do, and anything that you want to be based off of that variable, you have to use an expression in order to tell it to use that variable's value, right? So inside here, we've got the bank folder source connection, which is nothing more than telling it a folder location. Since we have create directory, we have to give it the name of the directory that we want it to create, right? That's done through a connection manager, and that's right here, the bank folder. That's the bank folder connection manager. We could hard code this. See, it's hard coded right there, but it's going to be overridden with our variable, because you have to put something in there. Did I do that? Nope. So then inside of there, I'm just string building again. And in my string, I'm using the current bank name. A lot of these bank names have special characters. They have periods and parentheses and dashes and other things in there. If you don't want any of that stuff out in there, then this is the perfect time to clean it up. You can use a script task as the first task here. You could put a script task up here, clean up the bank name, and then create the folder based off of that. And then create the file based off of that too, if you don't want 2 periods in a file or 2 periods in parentheses and quotes and all that other garbage in the file. I mean, it's a couple of these really suck. I'm glad I don't have to actually process these. And a couple of them had I had to go in there and manually change in the database because I didn't feel like doing it in here, because I actually had like asterisks and stuff in there. It's like, oh, bank name, get an asterisk in it, but whatever, right? So I think it was a product of the list that I pulled it from. But all the same, you can either change it in the database or you can change it in the flow, right? And then for each one of those, you have your data source here, that again you have to qualify with the actual query that you want, with the actual value that you want, that you've pulled in from a variable. And here we're actually got a cluster index on current bank ID, so we're all good there. And then again for our file destination, we have to build our string right here. Boy, it's thick, isn't it? There we go. So we're string building with our double wax because it's an escape character. And then we're just building it from there. You can hit evaluate, and you won't get that last one, but you'll at least get the basic structure and know that everything's okay. And so far, there's not really much bad here. But they're not really production-ready scripts. I've been showing you this stuff to teach you how to build the strings and teach you how to do the expressions, but it's not really a production-level script that you would want to push out to one or several boxes in case you need to make changes, okay? But this one is a little bit closer, and the reason it's a little bit closer is because we're being a little bit smarter. If we had just this value, that's okay, but you notice how we've still got 1, 2 locations here that we need to change if our base path changes, right? So we've got to go through there, and we could be putting files in locations that that we're not aware of. It could make it a lot harder to change if we change the base path, and we've got several operations that use that, right? So what we're going to do instead of hard coding it there is we're going to hard code it up here in the base path variable. So you see here I've got this set to, let me just go ahead and expand this. I've got it set up for SSIS Basics 2. So that's our base path. That's where all of the other folders or all of the files are going to be put, right? In a production level script, you always want to do it like this so that obviously if it changes, you've only got one place to change it. And the entire package will move everything over without you having to bother, right? In the previous packages, I would have had to go through and change it in every one of those expressions because I built a hard-coded string, and we just can't have that, right? That's just bad news. So the whole thing doesn't really change. What I've done here is I've added a script task at the beginning that all I'm doing, if my editor will come up, please.
Sean, can you use UNC names as well?
Sure. I believe we're starting to feel the strain. There we go. So all I'm doing in here is I'm building this. Oh, look at that. I've got my little message box there. Oh, well, I'll keep it because I had it in there for a reason. I don't know what it is now, but we'll see. So I'm building a string. I'm saying that the bank path is the base path to string plus the current bank name plus the current bank name dot text. So I'm still putting them in their separate files and their separate folders, only now I've only got one. Now I don't have any place to change it. Let me see. Okay, top 10 there. Oh, I think it's here I want. Let me make sure I limited this before. Okay, that's what I thought. Top 5. So we're only going to pull in 5 this time, okay? So let me delete all these guys with the exception of this. Yeah. Okay. Because I got that message box there, I don't want a message box out of 150 of them, so I'm going to do 5. Okay. So inside of here, if you look inside of the bank file, I hope I did this. Stop it. There. In my expression. Now you see the only thing I have in my expression is the bank path. Whereas before I built a string. I built the string in the script this time out of other variables. So now, still, if I change that path, I've only got one place to change it, and it just goes through everything else, uses that path that I built. Fair enough? And there's my path. Path. 3, 4, 5. Yay. And I've got 5 and files in each one. Fair enough? Okay. See if there's anything else significant about this one. I did want to show you one thing about this script. It's in memory, so it should open up faster. All right. One thing that I really like about, and like I said, this is all the Copmy editor. You won't find this stuff in Yukon. One thing I really like about the script editor here is when it comes up, it initially tells you how to work with variables, how to work with different types of stuff. It automatically tells you how to call a variable, tells you how to call a log, how to call an event, and how to create a connection. Dude, that's fabulous. Those are like the 4, how many are there? 4? Those are like the 4 most common things that you ever do in a script, and they're telling you how to do it right there in case you brain fart or in case you just don't know. That's fabulous, man. It took me forever to learn how to do that. But the fact that they're giving it to you in comments up at the top ahead of time, that's tremendous.
Scroll up to the top.
Sure.
So it includes the libraries on that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I remember being at a session with Paul Tripp a while back, and he made a big deal. He's the guy that wrote the DBCC checkDB commands for Yukon. And if you look at the commands, when you have an error these days, well, in the 2000 days, when you had an error, it just shot up some kind of cryptic error that was just horrendous and gave you very little information whatsoever. And they went through there painstakingly, and for every error you could possibly come up with, it told you what caused it, what one of the most likely fixes is, where to go if you don't know how to fix it, and so on and so on. I mean, they give you lots of information about every single error, and it's really, really impressive to see, right? And I'm glad to see that's kind of started to make its way into here a little bit, because this is just fabulous. Being able to get that little bit of information up there at the top is great. If nothing else, you can it saves you on typing, right? Because you can just copy and paste it down there, and then just change your little values. So, okay, that's it for creating files. Now we're going to talk about loading files. And unfortunately, the load file section is a little bit shorter because, well, I crashed and burned on that one on my way up here. Dude, I mean, seriously, I had the package ready. I had it going. I had it working. When I got up here, it says it couldn't find the file. And the file was nowhere to be found, and I have no idea what happened to it. But I had to delete it because it tries to build it with the rest of the solution when you run something. So I had no choice but to delete the association. But anyway, okay, this is one of those times and when it's really great to have a sequence, because I've got 2 separate methods for doing something with each one of them has their own separate properties, and I couldn't run each one of these unless I had them in a sequence. This one I could do okay because it's in a for each. This one is in 2 separate steps. This is not a for each. This is 2 separate steps. And I can right click and run task. I can execute task, but I can't execute a chain of tasks. Okay? So that's where the sequence container comes in, where I can say execute container instead. So that's a really good place right there where I've got 2 separate methods for doing something, or in the case of a real load, 2 autonomous processes, thanks, that I'm going to need to troubleshoot. And I can, if one of them fails and the rest of them pass, I can troubleshoot just this one, get just this one going again, and not have to run through the entire thing, right? So, okay, right now we are loading files, and there are two basic methods for loading files. One of them is to cursor through them with a for each, like we did before when we wrote the files, and the next method is to use the Multifile Flatfile Manager. Okay, and they both have their own little quirks, but they're used for two separate things, and they're actually pretty cool. And this is another one of those, like the ADO record set, that most people don't know how to use the Multifile Connection Manager. So this is another one of those that's really nice to have in your arsenal, and now you'll see it and go, oh wow, that's actually pretty cool. So, at least I hope you will. So we'll start talking about this one first. In our for each, this time we're talking about our collection is going to be for each file. And we just happen to specify the folder. And we said star.txt. Of course, you can use any number of things, star bank.txt or WOV star.txt or star AMA star.txt, right? So anything you could do at a DOS prompt to make wildcards, you can do here, okay? So you can actually do some pretty cool stuff there. You could just say star.star. But we, I'm sorry?
Use question marks?
I've never used question marks in here, so I don't know. I've never had that fine of a requirement. Good question, though.
Well, you can't intermix too many stars, and so if you use question marks sometimes you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. I don't know.
Just curious.
Yeah. Maybe we'll test it here in a minute. Okay, so I've got the fully qualified name here. That's going to be the full path, c:\\/ right? You could also do just the name and extension, which is, wachovia.txt, or you could do just the name, which would be just Wachovia. Okay, you got some pretty it's pretty diverse, right? Flexible. That's the word I'm looking for. Flexible. And of course, do you want to traverse subfolders? In this case, we certainly do, right? Now, what we're going to get here, do we have it? Oh, good. No, we don't. Oh, good. We've only got 5. Yay. Okay. Variable mappings to the current file path. So for each one of these, again, we want to map the current file path to a variable because we're going to use that, right? So we're going to load that, and we come inside here, and we got some interesting stuff here. We've got our bank file that is going to be that current file path that we've already assigned inside our loop, right? So it's gonna switch the file connection every single time and say load from this file, load from that file, load from that file, load from the next file, right? And here we're going to add some lineage to it. You notice again my tasks are named very well, right? A lot of people are concerned about lineage, especially in warehouses. And so here we're going to add the current file path, where was the file that it was created from, the date, the machine name that loaded it, and the package name. These are all things that could do you a lot of good in troubleshooting, right? So for every one of these, and this is the derived column right here. Where is it? Right there. That's the derived column transform. And we're just adding tasks. We could have taken any of the existing columns and altered them in any number of ways using this as well. But we're just going to use it to add some lineage on there. Now there is an audit right here. And I'll just drag this over here just to show you. Yes. But the problem with audit is you only have certain audit types. It does the same thing that the other one does, is it's going to add that lineage to it. Okay, it's going to add those columns to it. But you can see here that you're very limited in what you've got. Whereas I could put anything else in the package I wanted to using the derived column. So I never use the audit. I didn't mean to do that. There we go. I always use derived column because I almost never want what's in audit, and those are all system variables anyway, and I can get all those system variables from the derived column anyway. There's no reason to use the audit. I just don't see any point. And here we've got a counter variable. This is the row count right here, and all that does is that's going to sit there, and you create a variable with the package scope, and all that's going to do is it's going to count the rows as they come across, and it's going to assign them to that variable. So if later on in the package you wanted to compare counts, you could do that. Okay. And then here we're just going to put it into our bank import table. We've got a separate, just a generic table for loading banks. So for every one of these, here, let's do this. Bank import has 5570. With any luck, that'll go up. Execute container. There we go. And you notice how I'm message boxing the counter variable every single time, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Okay? And you also notice that inside of here, I named my counter the name of the variable. Okay? Again, stop it. Again, just be nice to yourself. You know it's a counter variable. You can see the little icon there, right? So put the name of the variable right here so that you don't have to open it up every single time and look at it and say, okay, well, I need to see what, okay, well, that's this and that. You know, give yourself the variable name. I do that kind of stuff all the time. Okay, and the reason why I printed this out specifically was because now we're going to come over here. Oh, wait a minute. We never proved that we loaded it, did we? I hope we're proving something. 5620. Thank God. Okay. So now we're going to use the Multifile Connection Manager. And the way we use that one is a lot the same way we use star.txt. And I don't know how, I would imagine this could use a lot of the same wildcard stuff that the other one can. I mean, it uses star, so it can probably use a star.txt, right? I've never had to. I usually just take all the text files in a folder or something. But one thing that this thing doesn't do is it doesn't traverse subfolders. Okay? So that's one limitation of this one. So for this one, you can see we're only going to get that once. We're actually going to have to go, if we want to load anything, we're actually going to have to go load this guy with files again. Because I believe we've deleted all of our files. There we go. There we go. So now I've actually got something to work with. Okay, so the Multifile Manager, again, just in case, just to kind of refresh myself. Okay, yeah, that's it. So all you do is specify the folder and the files, the list of files, set all of the column information that you want, and then you're ready to go. You don't have to iterate through them one at a time because it does them all as a single unit. Okay? And the reason that's significant is going to be made very clear when I execute this container. And now you see that the counter variable has gone to 1662. So what this does is it treats all of these guys as one file, and it doesn't reset the counter every single time, which can be very, very useful if you've got multiple files and you need to know the total number of records that you're importing. That could be very useful. You can either do it this way, or you can add a lineage to it and put a timestamp on them and then go back to the database afterwards and count them from the timestamp. But if you need to do that in the package, right, being able to keep track of them like that with the counter variable is very, very useful. So there are two different methods for loading multiple files. This one is the one that's used most commonly because it can traverse subfolders, right? And you have a lot of options inside of here that you can do with your data flows, and you can add columns and all of that, right? And in here, you really don't have that. There's no place to transform because you're not in a data flow. You're in the control flow still. So there's no real place to transform anything or add any lineage or anything like that. So you're really kind of stuck. All you can do is load a bunch of files and then get out of it. But it's still pretty useful if that's all you need to do. Flat out. I've used this a number of times when I've BCP'd a bunch of stuff out and didn't feel like sitting there writing a cursor. I just said star.txt and then just loaded them all and went on about my business. It's really good for really quick loads. So those are...
Quick question.
Yes.
Sequence container 1 is not set to complete before sequence container 2 starts. Is that your intent?
Yes, because I'm running these as two separate methods, and they're autonomous. You notice how I didn't run the package; I only ran the containers.
Okay.
But if that were going to be the case, yes, these would either run at the same time, or I would have to run them. I would have to put a precedence on from one to the other, right? So, like he said, as it stands now, they'll run at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Let me drag this guy down here. Come on. You can do it. There we go. Now they'll run one after another. Right? But you notice again, the coolness of the sequence is every step in here will run before this one runs. Okay? And that means even outside of the for each loop. I could go outside of the for each loop. And put something in here. And it would still be part of that sequence, and it would still break the loop, do something else, and then break the sequence and go on, right? Let's get rid of that. I'm not going to save the... Okay, now, one final thing that I was hoping to actually show you, but I can't, so I'll just bring up a load file anyway. There's one other method for loading files into tables. But what we've done is we've done we've created multiple files from a single table. We've created multiple files in multiple directories. We've loaded files into a single table, and we've loaded files from multiple directories into a single table. What we haven't done is load multiple files into multiple tables. Okay? And unfortunately, that's not as easy as it sounds. And the reason it's not as easy as it sounds is because when you come in here to your connection manager, to your OLADB manager, and you do your expressions, your property doesn't have a table name that you can just iterate through and change your table name. I've talked to them about this a few times, them being Redmond. You notice I've got server name and initial catalog. Why not table name? Right? I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the connections. With the mappings. But if the mapping is the same, if the tables are identical, I should be able to do it, right? So in order to do something like this, I had this built, and I'm really kind of pissed off that it ate itself. What I had to do was I added a script task in here into the for each. Now you can't do it over here, right? Because you're not iterating through it. What I did was I added a script task in here to build a string, a SQL string from a variable. Okay? So in my variable, in my script task, and then my execute SQL task, what I did was inside of there, I took the current table that I've piped into the variable, and I've built a string, and I said if exists, the long string says basically if not exists the SQL. If not exists this table, then create this table. Then create table blah 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 blah. And so I created the name of that specific table on the fly, and then I ran it here. And then instead of having this guy do the data load, I had to do it in a task. I had to do it in a script task where I created the connection manager myself and connected to that table myself and then did it, which can be done, but it's a lot harder, and it took me all morning to do it, and then it ate itself, and I can't actually show it. But this is just showing you that it can actually be done. It's just a lot more difficult and a lot more trouble than it's worth. And there you're going to get into some real trouble because, like I said, a lot of these tables have parentheses and dashes and periods, and you're going to create some pretty horrendous table names. If you don't mind that, go right ahead. You're better off cleaning it up afterwards and then doing the bank name off of that like we did for the other one. But it is possible and it is there, and it's far more trouble than it's worth. But that completes the category of everything that we've done from single to multi, and now multi to single, and now multi to multi, right? The only thing we haven't done on the export is multiple tables to a single file. But that's really kind of the same, a lot more of the same thing. I mean, so with that in mind, that's all I have planned. I wasn't sure how long this would take. If there are no questions, I'm done. Even if there are questions, I'm done.
Good job, man. Yeah.
Very good. Appreciate it.
Sure. And I will upload all of these, the data and the examples and everything, so you can just plug it in and just do it. And I have been told many a time that packages like this that are fully documented, somebody went through to do another project and couldn't figure out how to do something and pulled up one of those teaching packages that I did, and it done step by step. Oh, that's what I forgot, and boom. So they're pretty handy to have around.
You're going to keep this online, right? The recording?
Yeah,